What's up, everybody? Welcome to System Crafters Live. I'm David Wilson, and today it's Friday. So as usual, we're back with another live stream where we get together as a community and talk about whatever interesting topic we've come up with for this week. So before I get started, I would like to say hello. Let me make this green screen go away here. Jeez. Hello to the people who are here in the chat. I think I missed some folks at the very beginning because I had to reload this chat window, but I can see Piotr, Mylin, Technomag, Jerry, John, Frogfather, Minas Mazar, Case, Alejandro, Edis, Block, Srivatsan, I'm sorry, Ashraz, Juvenal, let's see, Rune, Daigo, Arnav, someone without a name, Rostislav, Baksinski, Marduk, everybody's here today, jeez, Jan, Archaic Lord, Bill, Peter, Felipe, yeah, Lova, nice to see everybody here, lots of folks here today. Thanks for joining. Nicolas says, not going to say I took the day off to join live, but this is my R&R of choice. Well, that's very nice. Thank you very much for saying that. I don't know. I think it's a nice way to end the week, to have a stream where we kind of get together and talk about fun stuff. So it's nice that other people think the same. And I can see in my live reading of the screen here that the chat, for whatever reason, decided that purple is the color of the day for everybody's names, and I think it's going to be very hard to read that. So sorry about that. I don't know what the deal is with it. If I were to try to go into Baczynski, thank you for pronouncing that for me. Anyway, if I were to go and try to reset that chat, I don't know if it's going to give me a different color that's better, so let's just leave it as it is for now. Hello to Duncan, Luis, Ashen, John, Kuba, and Eugene, Yusuf. Cool. So, as far as like updates are concerned, today I don't really have any. As you might have noticed, I also did not post a video this week, and I don't have a good reason for that other than just like there's a lot of things going on right now. Obviously, I'm doing Flux Harmonic streams twice a week, and that takes up some time. So I'm shifting my focus back to System Crafters a little bit more heavily right now to try and get a good plan together for the kinds of videos that I want to make. And that's part of why we're here today, is to talk about one of the big parts of the plan to make a new series that might be of interest to people. And we'll get to that in a little bit. Ashra says, next live stream, crafting the restream chat colors. Yeah, I probably should just do that. I don't know if it's safe for me to do it on the stream right now, but I can change it. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. Edda says, purple chat would match nicely with Emacs from Hell. Yeah, it would be even less visible, that's for sure. Someone from Indonesia on Twitch, Don Jarek, sorry for the bad pronunciation. Hey, Alex. Arnav says, if you don't mind telling us what's the story with the wallpaper, I just found it on Unsplash. If you just go to unsplash.com, there's just like a bunch of royalty-free wallpapers, and I just picked one that I liked, and that's the story. There's no personal significance to that. All right. So today we are going to be talking about what my plan should be for a new Emacs From Scratch series. We'll talk about the why in a little bit, but first of all, I'll say I've been talking about the possibility of wanting to do this for a while, probably for, let's say about 4 or 5 months at least. But my plan is that I want to create a new Emacs From Scratch series to focus specifically on configuring Emacs using only what comes in the box with Emacs, while also teaching Emacs Lisp. And really the goal is to show how much better you can actually make Emacs without having to pull in any community packages, including things like use package. Basically try to like actually write a full Emacs configuration without any help from the outside. Once you learn how to configure Emacs, just writing Emacs Lisp yourself and using the things that are already in the box, I think you're going to be in a much better position to use third-party packages, because you'll understand how to configure them a lot better, and you'll have a much cleaner configuration that you fully understand, instead of just like going to various places and taking bits and pieces of config that you found from somebody else's config, or Emacs from Scratch repo, or like the README for a package. Like, we tend to just grab all these little pieces here and there. We don't really know how they fit together. We just put them in the config and they sort of work. And then whenever they break, we have a problem in that we don't know how to actually fix them correctly. So I kind of want to go to even more of a fundamental level so that people can learn the right way to write Emacs Lisp, to configure Emacs, so that you understand how everything fits together, and then you have the ability to make more informed choices about how to set things up. And today, basically, I would just like your help in deciding what features of Emacs we should cover, and also potentially what order that we cover them in, because all that really matters in ramping someone up who doesn't know anything about configuring Emacs. I mean, first of all, they have to know how to configure Emacs, like which file to even open to write a configuration, and then they have to figure out how to deal with writing Emacs Lisp. And if they never used a Lisp before, this is kind of a new experience. So I think this is the kind of series that is really needed for bringing somebody up to speed if they want to actually write their own Emacs config. Etta says the first Emacs from Scratch video is almost at 100K views. Very nice. Yeah, the previous series has had a lot of views and a lot of really nice comments, people saying that it helped them out a lot. I want to do better than that, at least in terms of how well it helps people, because I think that there were some mistakes that I made in the first list. Sorry, I just read the chat and the word just jumped into my mouth. In the first series that I want to try to correct. So let's see, I missed a couple other things. Ashra says, we need to prepare System Crafters bingo cards, possible fields, bad color for names in the chat, EXWM crashing, and the green screen thing. Yeah, and of course the strange bots that show up. Yeah, we do have a few little, recurring themes in the streams, and they're not all good. But it's okay. Let's see. And Piotr says, good thing org is already in the box. Yeah, we'll talk about that too. Case says, I like small tiled wallpapers. Those are pretty cool. I might end up making some of those at some point in the future. Let's see. Case says, to make a pie from scratch, you first have to create the universe. Yeah, I guess that is kind of true. Like, to actually understand how to make a pie from scratch, then you have to make all the things that go into it. Let's see. Okay. Yes, org mode is included in core Emacs. So, the question on everyone's mind, why do it over again? I didn't think about answering this question before, but a couple of people asked me in IRC today why I was doing this. So, I feel like I made a couple mistakes the last time I did the first time I did Emacs from Scratch. First of all, copying and pasting from my own config without much testing. So, in the first, I would say 2 episodes, I made a couple of really critical errors that caused problems for people who came across the series. I would say not everybody hit it, but I would say a lot of people hit it, and it was something that, could have been a barrier to some people who didn't have the time to try to figure it out, because it's a little bit weird. And that is that when you install Ivy, I think I had said that Council comes with it, and that was false. It doesn't actually come with Ivy. You have to install it separately. However, the way that I was using the Emacs from Scratch configuration was actually picking up packages for my own system configuration, and I didn't realize it until later. So the configuration says you should be able to just use this Council config as is, and for many people, they realized that it didn't load, and many people did figure out that they had to install Council, but that's kind of it is a barrier to entry, and I feel bad that was an issue. People still hit it even until today. So that was kind of a big issue. And then a lot of it was I was basically going into my configuration file, picking out pieces that were, what I thought were helpful for people, and just dropping them into the Emacs from Scratch config. I was explaining how they all worked, but I feel like, copying and pasting and then sort of encouraging other people to just go and look at the repo that I put together and then just copy and paste that config, it doesn't really help them learn how to configure things correctly. I mean, it will get you started, but I did notice that a lot of people would just take the Emacs from Scratch config I had in that repo and just use it as like a configuration, which is not really what I intended. I intended more for it to be a point of inspiration for creating your own config, and a lot of people did do it that way. They just went and created their own config and copied the pieces they wanted. But I think it's better if you are able to learn how to write it really from scratch. Like copying and pasting will be a part of it. I mean, obviously you don't want to have to type every letter yourself if something's already there for you, but you shouldn't have to feel like you need to just copy and paste wholesale without really understanding what's going on. So I want to try to solve that problem this time around and do it better and be more prepared. A corollary to that was actually not preparing adequate show notes. So in the very first streams, I didn't do like I do now, where I do very detailed show notes that is basically like a blog post almost, and it's sort of the script for the entire episode. I was doing things very much from the hip. I was sort of just speaking off the top of my head and explaining things. I did a little bit of preparation in terms of thinking about how I would explain things, but I didn't write anything down. And because of that, there's not much of a record of the things we discussed in this first maybe 2 or 3 episodes. And I think when it comes down to people using these videos as a resource for learning, having show notes is very important because it gives you something you can search over. Also, it is a place where you can copy and paste things, but it also has written explanations. So if you don't have the time to watch a 30-minute video, you can just go read the show notes instead and get a lot of the same information. So having adequate show notes is going to be very important for doing this the next time. I mean, basically, all the series I've been doing, I would say last year, have what I would consider to be adequate and sometimes excessive show notes. So it hasn't really been a problem for newer videos, but it definitely was a problem for the first Emacs from Scratch series. Let's see. Bill asked a good question. What version of Emacs will you target? 28? Yes, I am going to target Emacs 28, and that's mainly because by the time many people run across these videos, which I mean, like, a lot of people will see them when they get released because, you're all watching this channel. I imagine a lot of you will watch them, but the people who find it later will probably be using Emacs 28 stable. So it's better to talk about the Emacs that's coming so that it stays up to date for the people who find the videos later. So yeah, we will be using Emacs 28 for that series, despite the fact that Emacs 28 is not fully released yet. I know a lot of people who do use 28 now because they're either building for master or they have a package in their Linux distribution that allows them to use Emacs 28. So I don't think it's a big problem. And a lot of what we're going to talk about will be relevant to Emacs 27. But I probably will cover features that are new to 28 because there's been a lot of new things that are useful added in the box to 28. So we're going to definitely use 28 for that. Gunn asks, are you going to redefine the key bindings in pure eLisp? Well, we're definitely going to use the inbox key bindings. And I saw Case mentioned Viper mode before. A while back when I was thinking about doing this series again, I looked into using Viper mode a little bit to have like a Vim style key bindings that are built in. And Viper mode is, if you're used to using evil mode or if you're used to using Vim, Viper mode will violate your expectations, and it's going to be enough of an annoyance that you're better off just not using it, in my opinion. So I think we're going to stick with vanilla Emacs key bindings, but setting key bindings will be an important part of the discussion for sure. Oh, and Ashraz brings up a good point about the Kua mode key bindings, which probably I should mention because that is a good way for people to sort of, ramp up to Emacs if they're used to like typical, Control C, Control V, Control X, copy and paste. Let's see. How about the ELPA repo? ELPA is an interesting development that, wasn't really a thing. Well, it was a thing, but it wasn't so fleshed out as it is now, back when I did the first Emacs from Scratch. I mean,
It's okay, I think, to talk about ELPA, but I don't want to get into that until much later, or maybe not at all. I would probably consider that some other video. Another thing about how I'm going to do this is that Emacs From Scratch started off talking about how to configure Emacs, and then I started going into topics about like how to use DRED. I mean, we did some configuration on DRED, but it was a lot about like how to use DRED, how to use org mode. And I think we're going to focus specifically on configuration in the new Emacs From Scratch. And then I'll use the Emacs Essentials series to talk about the in-the-box functionality that you can use and explain how to use it. Some of the things we haven't covered yet, like, registers, bookmarks, project.el, even the built-in VC mode. Some of these things, we'll cover those probably in the Emacs Essentials series that I need to revive. But yeah, I think we're going to be very focused on config. Shabam says, so no evil. Yeah, probably no evil. I think it would be useful to do an actual series or a couple videos on evil, because the coverage I gave evil in Emacs From Scratch was enough to get people started, but I think there's a lot more to evil that I don't even know, and I would like to learn more about it, because I'm probably only using, like, let's say 10% of the functionality that evil mode has, so will probably be useful later. Alejandro says GNUs. GNUs is a whole thing into itself. I'm not sure if I'll do GNUs in this series, but we might do GNUs at some point. I haven't used GNUs since probably 2015, I would say, and I only tried it for very briefly. Hey, Mjolnir. Okay, let me catch some of the earlier stuff in the chat. Bill says 29ers unite. Yeah, I'm not even on 29 yet, I don't think. Let's see. Don says, so should David explain pros and cons of Vertigo like I explained Terminal in episode 9? Yeah, we won't be talking about Vertigo in the series because it's not built in. I mean, maybe one day it will be, but there is something like Vertigo that is built into Emacs 28. It's a vertical eye-complete mode. So we probably will discuss that because it is sort of a better, in my opinion, a more better or quote-unquote modern-looking completion interface. So I think we'll probably talk about that one at least. Ashrad says, I probably cannot follow the new EFS series since the last Emacs 28 snapshot for Windows was compiled in January of last year. Well, I have all the faith in the world in you, Ashrad, that you can compile it yourself on Windows. And also, I think you have WSL, so. Srivatsan says, no ME4E or org or LSP. Org is a possibility, but yeah, org is still a possibility. But we may do something different than we did last time because, I'm using external packages for customizing the look and feel of org mode. And maybe what we could do is do similar things only using the in-the-box configuration, because that could give us a good way to talk about faces and other things like, what is it called? Prettify symbols mode, maybe? Like, there's certain things like that we could possibly talk about with org configuration. Wow, my screen just went blank. Let's see. I'm getting notification sounds and I have no idea what they are. Yeah, now you saw me hit my lock screen. That's great. Oh, thanks so much, Bruno, for the €3 in super chat. It just now showed up on the actual YouTube screen. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. All right. Juan Adrian says, have you tried the new implementation of Web Engine on Emacs? I have not. Where is that? Okay. Cool. So, also, I sort of alluded to this before. One of the mistakes I made is not really showing how Emacs configuration actually works. I mean, we did talk about some things like, hooks, but I feel like when using use package, it obscures some details about how Emacs configuration is written that, hey, Christian. I think it's good to know how you would write a configuration without use package. So we're definitely going to skip use package for the purpose of this series primarily because you need to see how all this stuff is done in Emacs Lisp without using a configuration, quote unquote, framework or library or macro, whatever you want to call it. Because that is the fundamentals of writing Emacs Lisp. So the other side of the series is that I want to teach people how to write Emacs Lisp in a very practical way. We're not going to talk about language features. I already did a whole series on teaching Emacs Lisp as a programming language. And while that was probably helpful to certain people, I don't think it was a good introduction for somebody who wants to learn how to configure Emacs. So we're going to take a different approach this time and talk about just like what you need to understand about Emacs Lisp syntax, how functions are called, and just, you know, what is it that I'm actually looking at on the screen, and how can I learn to write it myself. And, you know, writing configuration yourself, writing, you know, your own key bindings, adding hooks, knowing how to sequence the loading of various packages based on things like, you know, certain types of files being opened, that kind of stuff. All these things are important to then understanding how things like use package work behind the scenes. So you can't really know how to configure Emacs well until you understand what's going on behind the scenes of all these other packages that you're using. Kay says, going to do a lot of prog-ends. I don't know if we have to. Yeah, we'll do it. I'm trying to think if there's this case where we need to do prog-end. Probably there isn't many in Emacs that I can think of. Let's see. Kay says that's not very from scratch. I'm not sure which one that was referring to. Ashraz says Emacs from scratch to start first with writing a Lisp interpreter in Scratch in C. Yeah, we're already basically doing that on Flux Harmonic. So I don't know if we want to go that far. I'm already regretting that choice. Not really, but you know, this week it was a little bit of pain. Let's see. Hey, Arno. Abraham says, Evo mode comes very early on, or is it important to learn all Emacs default key bindings? Well, I mean, I don't think you're going to learn all of the Emacs default key bindings because there's so many, but I've already got that Absolute Beginner's Guide to Emacs, which covers some, and then the other two videos that follow that, the efficient movement and editing key videos that cover all that stuff. So I'm not going to cover key bindings for Emacs in this series. This is purely about configuring Emacs and learning how to write one. So yeah, I'm trying to break these things down a little bit more so I can go more in depth in specific areas instead of doing like these massive hour-long videos where I cover a lot of stuff, but I can't really break it down into more fine points. That said, a lot of these videos, I'm going to try to make them... I know, I keep saying I want to make shorter videos, but I really, really want to do it this time. Like 15, 20 minutes max. I'm probably going to start editing what I'm doing so that I can cut, you know, the places where I may be rambling a little bit, or maybe some information that wasn't really needed whenever I wrote it. So I want to keep these things shorter, mainly because I don't want it to seem daunting to people. Like, you know, if you look at an hour-long video, you have to kind of consider whether it's worth your time or if you have time to watch such a video. But if it's a 15, 20-minute video, maybe 25-minute video, it's not so bad to assume that you could get some value out of it and then, you know, it'd be worth watching. Rostislav says the jingles is a bit too loud. Yeah, I do want to turn that down also. I wonder if I could turn it down. Yeah, probably can't turn it down very easily right now. Sorry about that. I wonder. Let me see if I can do it here. Chat widget. It's probably like a desktop audio thing. I'll fix it for the next stream. It scares the crap out of me every time. Yeah, sorry for the audio issue there. Let's see. Kay says, yeah, I love to MX forward line repeatedly. Yeah, we certainly want to do that. Oh, what happened? Okay, I'm waiting for the stream to come back now. I think that it's... All right, we're here, right? We're all good? Because YouTube is telling me it's not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. I think that the internet dropped briefly. Sorry for that. Anyway, let's get back to the slides here. Yeah, I know. Like, this time at least it wasn't Emacs crashing. I'm not going to say too much about that because I don't want to, like, actually encourage it to happen. Raina says, save the rambling for the live shows, edit and post not live versions. Yeah, that's basically what I'm doing. Okay, so, and I mentioned I also recorded all episodes as live streams, which are around 1 hour each. Yeah, I don't want to do that again. It was fun doing those as live streams. I think a lot of people, enjoyed it, but it's a different thing watching a video that's meant to be educational when the person trying to tell you something is also reading the chat at the same time and responding to people in the chat. Obviously, I could record all these as live streams and then edit them up, but I don't think the flow would be as good as if I just record them myself without having to speak to the streams. Arnaud says, I learned a lot from your live streams. What a challenge. Thank you for your work. Yeah, streaming is, got a lot of fun little challenges to it, but I really enjoy doing it, and that's the reason why I'm doing it 3 times a week now. So it's fun for me. I enjoy it. All right, so let's get into the actual topics. And this is not a comprehensive list. I really want to hear from you guys what else you think I should add to this. So I've come up with some things that I think are going to be useful. And I'm actually more interested to hear the parts of configuring Emacs that weren't so clear to you at first whenever you tried to learn how to do it, so I can make sure to cover them. That could be things that I covered in Emacs From Scratch that didn't make as much sense to you, that weren't explained well enough, or things that maybe you felt were gaps that didn't get covered there, or things that you eventually came around to later and you're like, well, I don't really understand how this works. Let's see. Screen go burr. I think people are catching up now to the video. How to remove the mode line. Is the stream resolution still bad? I think it should be fine now. So one thing about YouTube live streams, if the stream blips a little bit and then it starts playing again and it looks like it's low resolution, click the little wheel down in the video player bar and then set the resolution again, because sometimes it just doesn't want to change back to the higher resolution. I've noticed that while watching other streamers. The Krister says, some configuration for efficient movement and handling of text and files would be nice. Clicking more to do less, yeah. Display buffer A-list, yeah, we're not talking about that early on. I already tried doing a little bit on that. I think I still owe a video on, second video on display buffer A-list. And Edda says it took him the longest to figure out that you need to have a cloned Git repo for Magic to work. Well, it doesn't really explain that, does it? And Alex says coding, language servers, project navigation, auto linting. Yeah, some of that stuff can be done in the box with Emacs, and we might talk about that, actually. Nicholas F says, would you want to make an Emacs elevator pitch part of the series? I would probably do that as a different video. I have some thoughts on that. I haven't actually done it yet. I mean, I did that, why learn Emacs in 2021 video last year. That was pretty effective, I think. But, after talking about Emacs hours and hours, making videos on this channel and doing live streams, I think my perspective on Emacs has solidified a bit more. So maybe I could do a better short video to sort of, make the case for people using it. Gavin says, FlyMake deserves some content. People ask me about it in my Emacs videos. Yeah, FlyMake for sure. I mean, it's inbox, and you can hook it up without a language server. You just need like a linter to hook up to it, so definitely. Case says, honestly, I'd love some videos, like think of Prots config with his extras, but live code the extras and then config. Yeah. Let's see. Gonzalo says, not using Doom things and themes and mode lying and yet get an appearance that works with evil would be great. Yeah, well, we're definitely going to talk about appearance and making it look better without any external packages. Eric says, consider explaining the construct of Emacs first. Really nice to know more about the structure of this beast. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I feel like I've covered that in the Absolute Beginner's Guide to Emacs, but maybe not in a focused way enough that it would make sense to someone trying to learn how to configure Emacs. I think what I need to do is not try to make a video up front where I just talk about only the concepts, because that's going to be boring. I need to probably try to cover the concepts as I get to them while I'm talking about things. That way there's sort of a natural progression and you're gaining new pieces of information at the point where you can use them. And that's another thing I feel like I've done in previous series that probably isn't as effective. The first video is like kind of a context setting video, and I don't get into any of the mechanics of how the stuff works. So it's not quite as useful. Also, people tend to watch the first video and not really follow up with the subsequent videos. So I want to try to make sure that the first video is like very useful in itself and sort of leads people into the next one. And Ashraz also brings up a really good point, how to find help. I actually think I want to make a separate video on that because I haven't covered it yet, and there's so much you can do in Emacs to get help. I mean, obviously describe variable, describe function, that's going to be a big part of Emacs from scratch, because you need to know how to understand what variables you're setting, what functions you're calling. But using like the info system, that's kind of requires its own video, I think. Srivathan says, can we get Ivy or Council like Emacs? Yeah, vertical I-complete mode in Emacs 28 would give you something like that. Okay, so configuration fundamentals. First of all, where is init.el? Where does that live? I think I made a mistake in the first Emacs config videos, because I actually got this question a few times, like, okay, cool, it's nice that you can do all this stuff, but where do I put this file? I probably wasn't clear enough about that. I'm not sure. It was definitely explained in the README of the Emacs from scratch repo, but we definitely need to make it clear, like, the first step to configuring Emacs is knowing where to write the configuration, what file to put it in. Also, how do you reevaluate configuration snippets as you write them? So when you're creating your configuration, you don't have to restart Emacs. That may be something that people aren't familiar with. I mean, obviously, if you're in, let's say, VS Code, you can go change a configuration setting in the JSON file, and VS Code will automatically sort of pick that up because it's watching those files for changes. But in a lot of sort of text config driven editors, those things don't get picked up automatically. So instead of restarting Emacs, you can just re-eval the whole file, or you can eval snippets in the file. Obviously, many of you know this already, but it's important to explain how to do that so that people know what I'm doing. I think I explained that a bit in the previous Emacs from scratch, but I want to make it very clear how to do that. Let's see. Jerry says a help video on its own is a great idea. Definitely. Bruno says, what about a video to integrate Emacs with other systems programs? We should do videos for that at some point for sure. Someone mentioned earlier, I can't remember who it was, they brought up that recent post on Emacs Reddit about the menu bar being helpful. I actually also am in agreement with that, and I think I even recommended using the menu bar at first in the Absolute Beginner's Guide to Emacs, because one thing it does is it sort of gives you insight into what types of actions are available in various modes, and also what key bindings are set. So I don't think I'm going to recommend people turn that off immediately. I will show people how to turn it off if they want to, but I'm not going to recommend turning it off. The toolbar, on the other hand, that thing can go away because it's so ugly. And Ashpra says, will you go for xdg config home emacs/init.el? Probably. I'm actually using that now for mine, and I think that it's I think the sort of graveyard of .file directories in the home folder in Linux that sort of has accumulated over the years from various programs putting things there. It's kind of an outmoded concept, and it would be good if more people started using the config folder, because it's a bit more organized there. Yang Ming says, I would be interested in seeing videos on Doom Emacs for folks who want to get started quickly. Well, I mean, I think that, what's the channel called? There's a channel that's been doing videos about Doom for a long time. It's like on the tip of my tongue, and I can't remember. Somebody in the chat will say it. So let's see. Minas Mazur says VC over Magit. We'll definitely talk about that at some point, I think. I haven't really used VC mode enough yet to have an opinion. It definitely doesn't look as cool. Yeah, thanks, Arnav. It's Zaist Programming is the name of the channel. Doomcasts. Yeah, Benoit's saying Doomcasts. DT makes some videos, but it's not comprehensive in terms of like covering Doom Emacs. The videos on Zaist Programming are very comprehensive, though I don't really know. I don't really know if you can consider those up to date, because Doom is constantly improving and a lot of stuff. At least I know they've changed to, like, you know, Vertigo, and a lot of other fundamental things about Doom has changed over time. So I don't know if those videos are going to be as relevant anymore. And Bill says Doom isn't vanilla. Yeah, that's part of it too. Like I have not covered Doom, mainly because this is a channel about making your own configurations. And obviously you can do that with Doom Emacs. You can use Doom and create a configuration using Doom as basically your foundation. But it's not really as interesting to me to use Doom, because I kind of want to do things myself, and that's what I'm interested in talking about. So I'll be very clear up front. I don't think that it's a bad idea to use Doom. I think Doom is great. It's just not really something that I'm personally interested in using. So anybody who uses Doom is using it because it's, you know, a very good starting point. So it's just not something that I'm going to spend time talking too much about, I think. Indigo says vanilla Emacs ruined my life. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. So configuration fundamentals, anything else to mention there? A few people were mentioning how to get help. So that's definitely going to be a part of this. Gonzalo says Mike Zemanski's videos are really helpful too. Yeah, I haven't seen many of his videos, but he's been making them for a long time, and he's got a very, very good backlog of things to look at. Alejandro's making a good point. Organize your config in separate files. Good point. I think that's something that should come later. This is sort of like a, okay, so we've learned how to write a configuration. How can you organize it more effectively, especially if you're going to use only some pieces of it on certain systems? Let me, it's not what I would do first. I think it was something I would do later. So how about I drop it right here? So configuration, organization. So, okay, I know how to config. Now, what does a well-organized config look like? And definitely like a thing that comes later, because you don't really need to know that. It's sort of like a curiosity thing, I think, for people at some point. Gavin says, I feel like your content is more useful for Doom users than most Doom users think. Well, I mean, it's good to know how things actually work in Emacs, even if you're using Doom, because, Doom does not isolate you from Emacs. You are using Emacs, you are configuring Emacs, even if you are using some of Doom's helper macros for some of the configuration parts. Okay. Abraham says, making a Spacemacs-esque config, learning how to efficiently config big packages like Ivy and Evil. Yeah, I want to make a video on use package at some point, like how to effectively use package for making, your configuration a little bit more streamlined. I haven't really done that. I need to do that at some point. Okay, so maybe info system, definitely describe functions. So basic appearance. So these are the obvious things like setting a theme, setting your fonts, turning on or off various UI elements. And I feel like this is a very good starting point for Emacs configuration, because the first thing a person's going to want to do is make it look a little bit better. And it's a good place to talk about setting variables using setQ for, like, turning off certain things, or maybe running functions for setting the font face, the default font face. And also calling load theme to set the theme. I think I might want to try using the modus themes for this, or at least modus operandi, the dark theme. Because it is somewhat configurable, that might be another way to sort of show how you can tweak things and maybe understand how to look up the variables to learn how the package is configurable. So I think I'll use that in this video. Setting a font, I mean, you just have to have a font installed and set it, so that's not really a difficult thing to do. And that's kind of a pretty good excuse me, pretty good starting point video. Configuration fundamentals, probably these two probably would be the same video, hopefully about 20 minutes long, I think, because, you know, these don't take very long to do if you're writing it from scratch. So, you know, it's kind of a good, you know, shallow end of the pool introduction. Note-taking, project planning, yeah, that kind of stuff we'll do a bit more on later. Ashra says, are you going to go for a literate config or maybe an Emacs Lisp one? Definitely going to go with Emacs Lisp one. Outline minor mode actually is a good idea on that too. Let's actually put that maybe in this part. Because, you know, as I've talked about multiple times on the channel so far, I have mixed feelings about literate configs now, just because they can be a little bit of a headache to manage, depending on how you set yours up and also how complicated you've made it, like how I made mine, where it, you know, has configurable variables that come from an Emacs Lisp file that gets configured per system. I mean, you know, that's when things start to get a little bit overboard, I think. And I think I'll just do normal Emacs Lisp for this one. Gavin asked, do you think you'll return to the Emacs IDE series? I intend to. The problem with that series is that any language that I cover on Emacs IDE is probably a language that I'm not using very frequently. So not only do I have to learn how to set up the tools, I also have to try to understand the general use case of using the language so that I can do an effective job of showing how to use the language server and possibly the debugger for that language. So it's a little bit harder, excuse me, to do certain videos for that, but I do want to get back to it. I mean, obviously, a lot of people are interested in that. Gavin says, do the entire series in the customized interface. I think that would be sort of against the rules. S Storm says, oh, there we go. Sorry, folks. I know that just probably made you jump out of your chair again. A little off topic, but does anybody know anything about hyperbole? It came on my radar recently, but I'm struggling to understand its purpose versus something like plain org mode. I haven't really used hyperbole very much, but it's pretty in-depth. It seems pretty in-depth. It seems like it's pretty powerful, but I also don't really understand the point of it. So I will let people who have used hyperbole give their opinion on that. John says literate configs have a tendency to get out of date. Supporting text is a lot to update when making tweaks changes. Move to an illiterate config to focus on making the code more readable. Yeah, that's sort of the direction I'm sort of headed in at the moment. I still want to make a good looking website out of my config because I think it's a nice way to present it and maybe, you know, explain some things here and there, but I don't know. Ed, oh my God. Edda says I just lost 5 minutes of my life with that sound. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. If I could fix it easily right now, I definitely would. The problem with the thing from Streamlabs is that when I make a change to the configuration in their panel, I have to go back into OBS and tell it to refresh the browser pane so that it actually picks up the changes. It doesn't update those dynamically. Niklaus says, I use a literate config that's only tangled if the source is newer than the tangled files. Yeah, that's a good way to do that, I think. All right, and Anaket says eShell customization. Yeah, we'll talk about that too. Okay. Anything else basic appearance-wise? I mean, obviously we could get more into faces, but I think we could do that a little bit later, maybe when we talk about org mode. And let's see, anything else that would be related to appearance? I mean, obviously the next thing is the mode line. And it's one of these things where, you know, it's very easy to install Doom mode line and just use that, which is what I do. But I am sort of every once in a while thinking, you know, I would like to just go back to configuring my own mode line again now that I sort of understand a bit better what it is that I want from a mode line, which is, you know, minimalism and not really showing too much there, especially now that I put things in the tab bar instead. Sorry, I had to pick something up. Yeah, that could be considered part of the appearance video, but I think it's going to be enough of a foray into lists, configuring things with lists, and also, you know, how functions can be invoked, that it could be its own 15-minute video, which would be pretty good. Alan says, how do I update my packages? Well, we won't have that problem. Wow, Backdrop is doing really weird stuff. Jeez. We won't have that problem in this configuration at least, but I did make a video on that. Pemic YouTube says the differences between shells. I did a video on that in the last Emacs From Scratch, and a lot of that basically still is relevant, so you should check that out. Gavin says hyperbole is an entire environment. I didn't use it much, but it's basically a mega package. Most features are focused on a completely connected system independent of file type. Yeah, that's my impression, is that it's like a kind of a holistic system and workflow. You know, people have described it as like a competitor to Org Roam, but like a lot more in-depth and Emacs centered than that. It's just not something that I'm personally, I don't find a need for it. So that's why I haven't really tried to look into it yet. So Ashraz says, how to use a customized interface as a stepping stone while you try things out. Customized interface has some niceties that can show you the saved Lisp expression for your init. Yes, I actually want to cover customize in the Emacs Essentials series. I just haven't gotten back to that yet. I mean, there's so many things I could talk about related to Emacs that, I mean, I could really just do videos like every week the rest of the year about Emacs and cover something different every time. So yeah, there's just things that like I know in the back of my mind, it's like it's on the list of things to do, and customize is one of those that I need to get to eventually. Nicholas says, what about system integrations like notifications, system tray integration, capture from X? Would be interesting to do a video on notifications and whatnot at some point. What did Christian say? I missed his message. Apropos eShell, moving admin tasks into Emacs would be useful. To install Emacs, you need to download it first, but eventually you can move tasks like minor shell interactions into Emacs. Yeah, that's a really good point. Let's think about that for a second. That's kind of its own video, I think, which is a really good idea. How do you do more of what you normally would do with a shell in Emacs instead? Sort of like a way to put together making some script commands in Emacs, plus maybe using dired for certain things, renaming files, etc. That is definitely a good idea. And those of you who also make videos, you should also do some videos on these topics as well. Okay. So, next thing, improving completions and selections. So this is a thing that is, if you have used Emacs, or if you're using Emacs for the first time, you probably don't know this is something that can be improved. So I think this is an area where you can show somebody how you can make the completion experience a lot better without having to even install a third-party package. So there are multiple completion systems that are built into Emacs. If you haven't actually looked into that, there's like iDo, iCycles. I think there's one called Flex. Or Fido. There's a few of them. I don't know like where all these came from, but you know, Emacs is just like an agglomeration of all kinds of Emacs Lisp code over the years that may or may not still be in heavy use. So we're gonna pick a better completion system, probably iComplete, because iComplete vertical is pretty good. And then we're gonna look into completion styles so that you can do more like fuzzy matching, or you know, different word style matching, which is going to be important for things like meta-x, where you're trying to like find a command in the huge command list, or maybe a variable or function name, that kind of thing. So that will be a good video, I think, and that's stuff we can do all in the box without having to reach for Vertigo yet. Now, obviously, I can point people to use Vertigo and consult, marginalia, embark, all those things related to that. But, you know, if we're going to do in the box stuff, we have some good options in the box. Alejandro says Carthix Emacs with batteries included is a good startup for ideas. Yeah, that's a great couple blog posts. And that's like the first time. Sorry, I don't know if you hear that screaming in the background once again. That's another thing for Ashraz to add to the bingo card. Yeah, that was my first introduction to Carthix blog post, and it was obviously a good one. Ashraz says Icicles is still a third-party one. Really? Okay. Yes, if I look at the completion styles variable, it will probably tell me that. Like, so I do Fido. So I guess it's Fido, technically speaking. I do. Icicles? No, Icicles not there. Flex? No, there's nothing called Flex. I'm deleting my slides. Anyway, stuff is in the box, for sure. Okay, so configuring a shell. So obviously we have multiple options for shells built into Emacs. Emacs shell mode is sort of like a halfway point between term mode and eShell, and I don't really think it's that worth talking about. So I think the more likely scenario is that I'm going to focus on eShell configuration, because I haven't talked about that at all yet, and eShell may require multiple videos, but not in this series. I'll do it like an introduction, like how do you set the prompt, how do you get history working correctly, those kinds of things, so that you can get a good basic eShell config going. Because I kind of feel like eShell is good enough for like 90% of the things you want to do in the terminal. Obviously, it's not as fast as something like vterm. If you run certain types of programs in the terminal, it's going to have problems because it doesn't do like normal terminal emulations, so you have to reach for something like term mode in that case. But term mode is a good backup if you want to use bash for some reason. So definitely going to cover that. Let's see. Gun says Fido mode for pre-internet communication. Yeah, I guess it is kind of like that, right? Let me check some more stuff in the chat here. How to use and maintain YA snippets. We should talk about that at some point, but I haven't. It's definitely not part of this video series. Aniket says how to set custom key bindings. Yeah, that's something I meant to add to this list and forgot. So let's see. Let's do how to set key bindings. Oh, another thing I forgot about. How about key bindings? Key bindings. Is the stream dying again? What's happening? So key bindings is helpful, and when I saw the stream blip, I lost my train of thought. There was something else. Okay, yeah. So configuring editor settings, so things like indentation or tabs, per file type settings. So basically like setting buffer local variables for certain types of files. Hooks. So we need to talk about hooks when it comes to configuring a buffer when a mode is loaded. So I think this is the thing I did not cover very well in the first Emacs From Scratch series. If I remember correctly, that I didn't cover it very well. So we're definitely going to get to that, and I'm really interested in people's thoughts on that particular section, because I think there's probably other things I'm not thinking about that we need to cover when it comes to like, okay, cool, you can make Emacs look better, you can sort of set things up in a certain way, but when you actually need to edit files, especially like different types of files, like let's say you're doing Python programming and also JavaScript programming and C programming, how do you set up all those modes differently for the things they need to do? Parent check. That's a good point actually in configuration fundamentals. So check parents. Great point. Thanks a lot, Srivatsan, for that. Fill column, maybe so. Geyser Guile. Geyser's not built in. We should talk about that at some point when we talk more about Guile, though. Smart tabs. Tabs for indentation, spaces for continuation. So we can talk about that too. Let's see. Smart tabs. Is that built in? I can't remember. Christian says auto completion other than iComplete. Ooh. Yeah. So there's nothing good for that in the box. There is something called CDET, C-E-D-E-T, which is like an IDE built into Emacs, but I'm not sure what the quality of that is at the moment. I know somebody was talking about it at Emacs Conf this year. Let's see. Yeah, it would be nice to, if we could talk about that a little bit, like completion in region, maybe. Deabrieve, hippie expand, excuse me, skeletons. So those may be a different type of video. I don't know if they require configuration so much or just explanation of how it works. So we'll get back to that at some point for sure if we don't cover it in this series. Nicholas also says using and managing terminal shells on Windows might be simple. It's not as simple as on Linux, but eShell is a good option on Windows. So eShell on Windows. Shell mode for shells. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, Deabrieve is built in. I mean, Deabrieve, hippie expand, and skeletons all are built in. Nicholas says, hoping the System Crafters community could do an open source bugs, docs jam, or hackathon from time to time. I want to do that, actually. And if people have thoughts for what we could do as a hackathon, please let me know either through, IRC, Discord, comments of the videos, email, whatever. I'm certainly interested in hearing about ideas for hackathons because I want to do one. I just haven't really sat down and thought enough about it. I mean, the obvious thing we could do is like, let's write an Emacs package of whatever it is you want to do. But, and we may still do that. But I think there's other ideas for things we could do as well. So if you have ideas on things we could do to hack on together, that would be great. Minas Mazer says, dear locals.el. Yes, thank you. That's also very important. I did a video on that, but it probably still bears mentioning here somewhere, dear locals. Yeah, I'll think about how I want to integrate that, but it is very important as far as something that could be used as an inbox feature. ANSI term should go in there. Yeah, let's just say ANSI term. I don't know what the real difference is between those anymore. I covered it a little bit, I think, in a video. Trip says, when discussing file type specific configs, you should definitely discuss editor configs since it's pretty useful. I think that we will have to cover that in a different video because that's not built-in functionality unless it's new and I don't know about it. Alejandro says spell checking. Yeah, spell checking / fly check for sure. I should find a way to set that up too. But I wonder if that's that's not part of the series. Like I'm trying to find the right balance of things that belong in this series versus somewhere else. But then again, I'm also getting stuck in my usual trap of trying to figure out like which series a video belongs to when I should just be making the stupid video and, getting the content out there. Fly spell, fly check is not built in. Really? It's not? You might be right. Fly make is the one that's built in. Okay, fly make. Yeah. Is that right? All right, so let's see. Hell mode like developed previously. Yeah, we're gonna definitely pull that one in for sure. Using tags files. That might be something. Was this like, I don't know if it's C tags, tags files. Yeah, that could be something we could do. Nicholas says, how to profile and debug an Emacs config is useful. We need to talk about that at some point. Debugging for sure. Yeah, in fact, it sort of fits, I would say. Debugging, profiling the config. What happens when things go wrong? I was thinking about doing a quick, like a shorts video on using toggle debug on error just so that you can easily figure out what's happening whenever you get some weird messages in Emacs. But a more full video also would be relevant there. Anton says tramp. Yeah, tramp. Tramp is more like a usage scenario, so maybe I would cover that as a video in some other series like Emacs Essentials potentially. I don't think it's as much of a configuration concern. ANSI term is like vterm without any compilation needed, says Gavin. Maybe it is different implementation. I'll have to look at it again. Let's see. iMenu. E-tags instead, Felipe says. Okay. So maybe that's the one I'm looking for. E-tags. E-tags? Company E-tags? XREF E-tags mode. Okay. What about XREF? I need to check on what XREF needs for it to function correctly. Emacs application framework, that's another video entirely if we talk about it. Hamilde says, maybe talk about creating a theme. I did a video on that in 2020. How to create your own theme, I think. It's one of the oldest videos on the channel. So you might check that out if you're interested. We could probably cover it another way at some point, but you know, I just put something together for that. Making a config multi-OS. That probably does actually fit in to this part. So making your configuration work across multiple machines / OSs. Yeah, there's definitely some more advanced stuff. Ashra says, as long as we stay in Emacs Lisp land, XREF needs nothing. Yeah, that's true. Kay says, did a video on that last week too. Which one? Hey, Julian. Thanks. Okay, let's see. I'll be happy whenever I finally have a streaming setup where I can have the chat in a more convenient location, so I'm not looking to the side the whole stream, where you can see like the whole profile of my face the entire time. Okay. Making a theme, yes. Yeah, that's right. We did a video last week, a stream about making a theme. It's just a very horrible one that changes all the time and will probably give you a seizure. Alejandro says, configure sending email. Yeah, that is actually in the box. Aniket says, case jump from YouTube to Twitch. Yeah, I think he wanted to use IRC to do the chat instead. Org Babel. You know, we talked about that pretty well in the Emacs From Scratch videos. I think we didn't really cover it well enough by itself for all the things that it can do, so maybe another time we'll talk about Org Babel in depth. L-feed. Actually, so that is something that's in the box. There's something called news. What's it called? News ticker. And I think there's something else even aside from that, but there's a thing called news ticker I haven't really used that is something that can pull RSS for you, but it's not exactly the same as L-feed. But we do need a video on L-feed at some point. Fade says, using the Modus themes to derive a general approach to defining a theme would be very useful, at least for me. Well, we're going to use Modus themes and customize them a little bit, I think, for this. But, yeah, I don't know how much more we'll go in depth on theming as a result of that. Gavin says, in my opinion, org has been covered pretty thoroughly. Yeah, I've done a lot of org videos, and, you know, there's a lot of other org videos online, but we should definitely cover some things again that I didn't really get to in depth at some point, but there's so many things to talk about that it's hard to get back to that stuff. Trip says, regarding editor config, discuss in the sense of noting the existence of it and how it differs from dir locals, local variables, comment blocks. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's worth bringing that up for sure. Making a major mode. Did we do that? No, we did minor mode in the Emacs Lisp series. We probably should do a major mode in the Emacs Lisp series. I just never got back to that. Samuel says, is it worth covering literate configs? Not again, probably. We did cover that once before, and like I said, I'm sort of like not as hot on the idea anymore. Or not in the way that I've been doing it so far. Minas Mazer says, configuration organization, how to set, get passwords and sensitive info, how to use them as variables, private.el. Actually, having a private.el is a good idea. It's something that I see some people doing that I don't actually do myself, which is have a part of your configuration that is basically like an encrypted file that gets loaded whenever you load your Emacs config, so that certain things like maybe passwords or more sensitive information you don't want in a public repo can be checked in as an encrypted file instead. So that's kind of an interesting idea for a more advanced configuration. Aria says, news ticker is way better than lfeed in my opinion. That's an interesting thing to hear. I haven't really used it, so I'm not sure. Alejandro says, major mode for Flux files. Actually, that's a good point, because I kind of do need to make one. So that would be a good opportunity to have a language that doesn't have a mode yet already that we can make a mode out of. Christian says, is there an end goal for the From Scratch series? Like, what is the definition of done? That's a good point, actually. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, but when is an Emacs configuration done, really? Because as soon as it's done, I give you, like, let's say, maybe 1 month max before you're thinking about changing it again, so. Gun says, modular config sounds cool. Yeah, we definitely need some things like that for sure. That's something that I haven't covered well enough in these videos, and people ask me about it, so I think that it would be good to cover that at some point. Hamilde says, talk about general to define bindings and hooks. We did that in the previous Emacs From Scratch series, and we're going to avoid using external packages for that kind of stuff. This time. Shubham says, when will the series start? Maybe this week. Maybe. We'll see. I'm highly considering getting it started soon, because the early parts of the series are very easy to make. So, because, you know, it's not very complicated, and I already know everything about how to do it, so I don't have to do much research. Gavin says, making a major mode for a file type would be great. Made a few for Vim, but have been procrastinating to figure out how to do that with Emacs. Me too, to be honest. I've done it once for a language that I work on for work, and I still don't know what I'm doing. I'm sort of just hacking around a little bit. You know, I've made some syntax coloring for the language, sort of basing it a little bit off of the existing JavaScript language definition. And I haven't yet seen like a good clarification on how you're supposed to do it the right way. So I will have to do some research on that first. Christian says, doneness could be enabling productive work for different scenarios, like editing website easily. Yes, definitely. Writing projects and programming, of course. Yeah, that would be good to sort of establish what the end result is going to be, so that someone who comes into the series kind of knows what to expect. And another thing, which is hard for me to do if I want to start this immediately, is it would kind of be nice if I had a finished configuration, sort of like, you know, when you watch a cooking show and they're telling you how to cook something, and then they pull the finished product out of the oven to show you, oh, this is what it looks like. So you don't have to wait until the end to see what you're going to get as a result of following the steps. It would be nice if someone could see more or less what the configuration would look like, but that also requires me to go do the work in advance for pretty much everything we would want to talk about to some degree before we get started. But it's kind of a good shiny carrot to get somebody to stick with the series if they see in the very first video, here's what the configuration will basically look like by the end. Then, you know, I think it's a good motivator to continue. So yeah, I think so. Hey, Lord Debbie. Yeah, Gun says Flux Harmonic mode for the modeling language. Definitely, we should do that. I think that'd be cool. Good tie-in between the two channels. Luis says, after discovering deabbrev expand, I use it to complete things on comments and strings and cannot live without it anymore. I need to be looking into that. There's certain features in Emacs that have been around forever, and I haven't used them, and I feel like I'm missing out, and this is one of them for sure. Christian says, with editing, you can show before, after per episode at least. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I mean, we'll get there fast enough, I guess. I don't want to drag this out and not get something going when I could very easily get the series started now, because I think it's good content. But yeah, it's always one of those things where I'm trying to maximize the outcome, and I don't know what's actually going to matter, and I overthink it a little bit. Benoit is saying something. Whenever I read the YouTube chat and it's got this restream bot sort of spamming it across, I tend to miss these messages. So I apologize to those of you in the Twitch chat that I missed the messages from. Benoit says, maybe this is what the hackathon could be about. Preparing a good, simple solution for the videos. What is this? Oh, what is this, a crossover episode? Yeah. Which show is that a reference from? You emit a goal and allow PRs to come in. Yeah, could be, for sure. Gavin says, starting this kind of stuff is always the hardest part for me. It's definitely hard, especially if you're trying to improve upon work that you did the last time, which pretty much every series that I do and things I was doing last year, I'm trying to improve on how I structure videos, the length of videos, how fast I get into the topic, that kind of stuff. It's always a refinement phase, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, I think I skipped ahead a little bit on this part. So anything else I want to say about shells? Yeah, I think that's basically it. So eShell as primary, term or ANSI as secondary if needed. Configure prompt, history, aliases maybe. Because there's some interesting things about eShell when it comes to running Emacs Lisp functions and aliasing them. Ubing says, will you include native compilers in this new series? That's a good question. It doesn't really require configuration, but knowing that it exists could be a nice thing, I guess. Ashraz makes a good point. Done is better than perfect since both are outdated after a while. Yeah, they definitely get outdated after a while. I had that with Org Rome, where I made the video and 2 weeks later they've already changed the configuration. So start doing it to get something done rather than try to be perfect the first time. Configuring Emacs is an iterative process. Yes, indeed. And Gavin makes a good point. Configuring visual commands for eShell for automatic term mode invocation. Yeah, regarding native compile, probably I'll just may note that it exists, but I won't talk about how to set it up. Eugene says, maybe it's too advanced topic for this, but what about the longevity of config? Like suite of tests or something to ensure that newest changes haven't broken anything. I've only, if I remember correctly, I've only seen one person who has gone to the extent to write actual tests for their config, and that's Cody G-Man. I haven't seen Cody around in a while, but yeah, it seems like it could be kind of hard to write tests for an Emacs config, because I'm not sure exactly what you could use to validate that it's working correctly, especially when some of the functionality is meant to be used interactively. So it would be nice if we could figure out a good way to do that, but it might be difficult. I wonder what Doom Emacs does, if they have like any kind of like test suite. Benoit says, you missed my comment on using authinfo.gpg for secrets. I did a video on using authinfo, maybe 1 or 2 videos actually. So I think that's probably enough for that topic for now. But if it does come up as something that needs to fit in, we could definitely bring it up again. Trip said, if I were doing a project like this, I'd start with a persona, roll up a character, give them a backstory, goals, and then role play advising them on getting from 0 to productive. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's good to have a target audience in mind, and I haven't really done that, but my target audience really is people who are a little bit daunted by the idea of configuring Emacs, or maybe don't even really know like what it means to configure Emacs, and possibly people who are not programmers by trade. because I do think that Emacs Lisp is a good language to learn a little bit about programming with. Obviously, you're not going to be writing applications with Emacs Lisp, but over time, you gradually can get more and more ambitious with what you do there and sort of understand things about control flow, if statements, setting variables, dealing with data structures, that kind of stuff. So yeah, if I were to say, who my target audience is, I guess the primary person would be the person who is curious about Emacs, but maybe is not a programmer, or maybe hasn't been programming for very long. But I'm not going to make this only interesting to that person necessarily. I think that, it will be useful and interesting to the general public. Case says, my Emacs config tests are me using Emacs. Yeah, me too, basically. So basically, anytime I try to restart my computer before a stream, I'll find out how good my Emacs config is, because I'll start it up and then I'll just be getting errors for 20 minutes. Nikhil says, after going over the basics of each topic, maybe show corresponding sections from your own config for reference. Just brief comments for 2 minutes. I could do that, but that's another one of those things that takes up time in a video and makes it longer, and I don't know how much value it provides, but I'll consider it for sure. Oops, sorry for that. Samuel says, on another note, I've seen a lot of people confused about Git versus GitHub and what they aren't meant for. I think your video style would be great for a go-to explanation. Yeah, well, talking about Git in general, I think that's something I want to do at some point. And the comparison of Git to GitHub would be interesting. Alan Soares says, you're going to cover advanced subjects such as data structures and Emacs internals. Well, depends on what you mean by internals. I have covered Emacs Lisp data structures in the Learning Emacs Lisp series, but like the actual internals of the C code, we haven't talked about yet, but maybe at some point in the future, we will talk about it. Hey, Aurora, good to see you. Gun says Magit and Forge. Yeah, we did talk about that in the last Emacs from Scratch, and I talked about Magit a lot last year. See ya, Ashras. Thanks for being here. Alrighty. So org mode. Org mode is a whole area, and what I'm basically saying here, Aniket says GitHub is an RMS. Which RMS are you speaking of? Org mode, we've covered a lot about org mode already in various different contexts. I think, we could definitely talk about improving org mode file appearance within the box config. But I don't want to go into a description of how to use org mode because I already did that, and probably it would be better to have like more focused videos on org mode not in this series. So it would have to be something related to configuring org mode for general use. And I'm not sure that there's much to say there that wouldn't be a part of some other series. Like talking about how to use org mode to organize your life, like to do task scheduling and things like that. We did that in Emacs from Scratch because at that time I hadn't done any other videos about it, so it made sense to do it. But if I were to do it again, I would have to do it in a more focused way, I think. Yeah, org agenda would be interesting. Compile code. Oh yeah, compile code from Emacs. That's another one that may be an Emacs Essentials video, but I really do need to make some short video on the Emacs compile command because I use it quite a lot and I like it. I think it's a really good feature of Emacs, and people probably don't know about it or haven't really used it much, but it's very simple and easy to use and fits in very nicely with other parts of Emacs. Gun says, how can you configure org mode without touching its internals? Well, in this case, I'm talking more about like setting faces on things. So setting the face to get a better look for org files inside of buffers. Also maybe doing things like changing the initial stars in the buffer to a different symbol, using some of the functionality in Emacs for doing things like that. But I'm not really sure yeah, I'm still not 100% sure it would be worth doing. Let's see. Yep. Oh yeah. So Benoit mentions and how to get proper ANSI colors in the compile mini buffer. Yeah, that that requires a little bit of tweaking for sure, or just like a couple of configuration lines. So we should definitely talk about Emacs compile at some point. Let's see. Let's see, videos for other series. So we definitely want to do one on Emacs compile, ANSI colors, recompile, functions to call on. Yeah, stuff like that. Felipe says GDB within Emacs might be cool. Yeah, definitely want to do that at some point because I've been doing that lately. Those of you who watch Flux Harmonic probably have seen me using GDB furiously because it's been necessary. And using it inside of Emacs actually is pretty nice. And I've only basically scratched the surface there. Benoit says Darren with Nix Shell, Geek Shell. Yeah, that could be useful at some point for sure. Darren with Geek Shell. Aurora says, what's GDB? That's the GNU debugger. And basically it's used for debugging native applications. Not only C and C++, it can also debug Rust and, oh, that's so loud, dude. and some other languages that are compiled to native. Minas Mazar says, cool topic. How can I stop rewriting a brand new Emacs configuration every year? Probably you have to stop using Emacs because I'm about to rewrite mine again. So what can I say? Annika says, how org agenda and captures work. Yeah, we'll definitely do that at some point. Okay. Yeah, another 5 minutes off of Edith's life. We're going to end up getting to at least 15 or 20 here, probably. But yeah, I would like to do a little short video on this whole idea of Emacs config bankruptcy and whether it's actually a problem or if it's just like a sort of like, you know, I think one of the areas that Emacs is really good with for people is the ability to customize your workflow and make things work smoothly for how you operate. And obviously, if it was the case that you would figure out the perfect workflow immediately and it never needed to change, then yeah, you wouldn't have to rewrite your Emacs config. But I think that part of the reason one would rewrite their Emacs config is because I think they can do it better and get better results out of it. And maybe because they learned a lot and they're like, okay, there's all this extra crap in here that I don't need anymore, so maybe I want to take it out. And it's sort of the case for me. Like there's things that are still in my config that I don't use, and there are patterns that are in there that are from my older understanding of how to configure Emacs that I want to get rid of. So it's just like that constant refinement. It's Emacs is sort of like the workflow tool for craftspeople, you know, which is sort of like why this is system crafters, you know, the people who not only want to make their own stuff, but they want to get better at making their own stuff and even sort of refine the things that they've made so that they, you know, are getting to a more perfect realization of what it is they have in mind, which if you have spent any time doing projects like this, you realize that this is a never-ending process. But that's part of the fun. I mean, it's why we do this, is because it's a hobby as much as it is something that's useful. Duncan says, any language that's compiled with dwarf 4 debug flags can use GDB. Yeah, that sounds right. Gavin says, I'm finding I'm changing my Emacs config less and less over time. Yeah, me too. It was the case for sure. But then over time, you get more ideas about how you would do things differently. And then eventually you get that point where you're ready to do it all over again. Fade says, Emacs config bankruptcy is a thing. Yeah, it's a thing, but it's a fun thing. It's part of the lifestyle. This is the Emacs lifestyle, people. We just have to get used to it. Gun says, your schedule for SE Live still shows Pacific time instead of UTC. I need to fix that for sure. There's like a header image on the channel that is really out of date that needs to go. But yeah, now that we're even more international than before because I'm not in the US, I have to do things in terms of UTC. Angry Bacon's here. Not a problem personally. I consider it a feature. Yeah, definitely. Let's see. What else? What else? So I'm trying to think of things for my own configuration. So let me just, take a little walk through my Emacs config for a moment and see what else would be useful to talk about. So startup performance. Something we could definitely talk about in the more advanced configuration section. So let's go back to this one. We're gonna go to the config organization. So let's call this advanced configuration. And then we could say startup performance. Loading packages only at the right time, measuring startup performance, etc. Okay, stuff like that. Aylin says you should present SICP to the world for serious Emacsers. Yeah, I don't know if I could do that any better than the people who came up with that did it, but I'm interested in ideas for how that could be done. Fade says, it was Prot that sparked my interest in using more of the built-in Emacs features. My current config loads a lot of packages. Yeah, Prot has definitely done a good job of advertising what's available. And as was mentioned before, Karthik's blog posts have done that too. I'm also sort of in that boat, not because I think that community packages are bad, but because I feel like there's so much stuff hidden in Emacs that it's worth giving it a try at some point, if for nothing else, just to see what's in there in case maybe you don't need external packages. Emacs is just as, well, I guess the Lisp curse, if you ever heard of, heard of the Lisp curse before, is this idea that for Lisp languages or environments, the problem you have is that people tend to go off and write their own stuff and not use shared libraries for things. So you end up with this really fragmented ecosystem. I think Emacs has sort of like a different version of the Lisp curse where people tend to install community packages instead of trying things that are already in the box, and like missing out on a potential opportunity to contribute fixes or changes to things that are in the box. So it would be good to sort of shine a light on things that are in the box and show how to use them and configure them in case people would rather use those instead. Gavin says, I think learning native features is important no matter the editor, less need to worry about the project completely breaking and getting abandoned. Yeah, that's also another concern. However, I'm sure there are nooks and crannies of Emacs, packages that are part of Emacs that don't really get maintained as well as other parts, because there's a lot of code that's been hanging around in Emacs forever. Oniket says, writing your own functions for configuration. Yeah, that needs to fit in somewhere for sure. We need to talk about that. I'm trying to think of the right place. Probably what it's going to end up being is when we talk about hooks, we'll talk about defining functions. So let me actually write that in the notes. So write up, let's see, hooks. Also writing functions for hooks. Jerry says, ideally you would start with what is available first and then change, add what is missing. Yeah, I mean, I think that can really only happen after you've had sufficient enough experience with Emacs and you've tried things on both sides of the fence to really know what it is that you need or don't need from what's inside. Alejandro says, compiling your .el files. That's a good point. That's something I don't actually do and should do. Compiling your Emacs config to bytecode for faster startup. I don't know if you can even compile it to native. Let's see, even native? Great point. Nova says, Doom Emacs content. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. Probably won't be doing Doom Emacs on this channel.
Gavin said you should get a bot to respond to the Doom content requests. I have Nightbot set up, but I haven't actually set it up for that. Lova says, Emacs in foreign language learning. Yeah, that would be something useful for me because I need to be doing a better job of learning Greek. So, Anikit says, this is more like an advanced EFS. I would say it's a more fundamental EFS where we're trying to get even lower than what I did last time, but also not be complicated. It needs to be simple. Fade says, having your config loaded as an .elc can mask changes made to the .el source file. You have to remember to compile the config every time you make a change, or you can do it at startup, I think. You can check if the files are out of date and then run it at startup, which obviously makes startup slower, but only for that first time. Oh, there it is again. I told you, Edis, that it's going to be at least 15-20 minutes off your life this time. Nova said, I'm watching from my phone. My Arch installer script broke my laptop. You should try GNU Geeks. Maybe you won't have that problem again. Gun says, Festival Speech Synthesis. I haven't looked at that. Nova said, I messed up something in the script. Seems to have completely broken the installer. Yeah, scripts are risky for setting up a full system, I think. Especially if they change things in how the installation CD works or installation image works. Lord Devi says, content on mastering the behavior of tabs in Emacs in different modes and contexts. Yes, so that is one of the things I want to get to in this section on configuring editor settings. So these two, indentation and tabs, or yeah, just indentation and tabs. That is a mess in the beginning, and it's good to be able to get that figured out. Amir says, could you make something on comment buffer? Yeah, at some point I do want to do something about comment buffer because I'm actually using that in a couple places to make my own custom REPLs. So we should talk about that at some point, but that's sort of like an advanced topic for maybe another series. Use hook compile function to save hooks. Yeah, so that actually is a good point. See, Arnav, thanks for coming. Ham on rye. Let's see. See, Anikit. I know it's late for folks who are in IST. Okay, so what else? I'm trying to think if there's anything else we could add to this list. Duncan says, one of the things wrong with the original EFS config is that the auto update packages notifications seem to show up way too often for me on some machines. Yeah, I saw that too. I don't actually use that in my own configs, but every time I would load the Emacs from scratch config again, I would always get a prompt to update, even when I configured it not to update so frequently. So I think there must be a bug in that package, or maybe the way that I configured it is not right, but I did see that too. That is a little bit annoying. Oh yeah, okay. Benoit mentions save place, save history, desktop save, etc. Let's see, where would that fit in? That actually is pretty useful in terms of having a working environment set up. So we could consider things like tab bar mode, which I still need to make a video on that, so maybe this is a good place to do that. Hey, Ben's Linux Adventures. Thanks a lot. Also, desktop save mode. I don't really use that, but I think it would be useful to have that set up. Session management, yeah, basically that. So session management, as Gun says. Let's see. Improving home office situation with collaborative editing, CRDT might be fun on a live stream. Haha. Doing CRDT.el on a live stream could be very funny. So maybe we could talk about CRDT.el at some point on live stream, because that's going to be total chaos. Which key? Let's see. Is there a built-in equivalent to helpful? No. I really wish helpful would be built in, because the way that it displays information in the describe buffers is way, way more helpful than what's already there. Which key?
There are equivalents, sort of, like, I think, describe bindings, sort of. Yeah, not really that good, but, you know, Embark, I really feel like Embark is like the ultimate replacement for which key. So let's say I press Control X T and then Control H. Then Embark is giving me this sort of searchable list. So like undo, I can just fuzzy match what I'm looking for. I don't really like the way that which key makes you tab through pages, and Embark does a better job of this. But, you know, Embark is not built into Emacs, so I can't talk about that yet. Oleg says, can you publish a lecture about CMake, Clang D, C++ project management? Did I cover C at some point? I mean, I'm using CMake, and I'm writing C code right now, so I could talk about that at some point. Gun says, isn't Control HK built in? Yeah, it's built in, but I think what was asked about before is getting a sort of a listing of all the keys under a given prefix without having to know which key you're looking for first. Matthew says, came in late, so I'm not sure what the specific list is for, but pop-up management seems fitting. Yeah, this is like in the box stuff, so we could consider display buffer A-list part of that, but that could go in the advanced config part, but maybe that's sort of like its own video, so we could talk about that potentially, like pop-up management. That is sort of a configuration concern. Josiah says, I feel like a sinner watching this from a Mac. There's nothing wrong with being on a Mac, though. I mean, like, Emacs is kind of nice on Mac. The fonts look great. Rostislav says, Guile Emacs. Yeah, that's a dream that may not come to fruition. Edda says, General can list what you have too. Does it? I haven't seen that, actually. Alejandro says, opening projects in new tabs with tab bar. Yeah, I'm trying to think of the right way to do tab bar videos, because tab bar is great. As you can see, I'm using it right now, if you haven't noticed. But I may want to do like a more full description of how you would use that. I mean, all of this, well, everything you see here is built-in stuff aside from the battery indicator that comes from Doom mode line, but that could be easily replicated, I think. Louis says, do you think built-in tree sitter or LSP support could come on Emacs 30? Possible. Very possible. Even Emacs 29 is a possibility, I would say, for tree sitter. I've heard discussions to that effect. Oh, well, I've heard people tell me there have been discussions to that effect. I haven't actually seen them myself. I haven't been following the Emacs devel list recently. Rostislav says the state of Guile Emacs. Yeah, I don't think there is currently a state of that. I think it's a dead project. Adib says LSP mode for major programming languages, which you haven't done yet. Maybe even setting up an AI autocomplete system like Tab 9. It's not a noob suggestion. I mean, I need to do more on that front, because that's a very important area of Emacs config for programmers. Fancy battery mode. Yeah, that could work. Gun says, what is tree sitter? Tree sitter is a parsing system for, it's a more advanced parsing system for languages that gives you basically a lightweight AST for any language that tree sitter supports. I learned about this because it was first used in the Atom text editor when I worked on Atom. Max here, who's like the person who left the most recent commit, Max created tree sitter. And tree sitter is starting to be put into other projects as a way to do better quality syntax highlighting. And not only that, like lightweight refactoring of code, because you do have some understanding of the structure of the language. So people are asking for that to be put into Emacs as an alternative to font lock, because it's much faster for tokenizing things and highlighting the code. And also you can do very interesting things with it. So there is a chance that in the future this could get added to Emacs core, but I don't know what the limitations would be in terms of like bringing it in and hooking it up and making it work without trouble. So James says, can you do something on Emacs regex? Yeah, I should do that at some point, actually. Let me add this to the list here. Regular expressions in Emacs. I also need to do a video on just search and replace. I don't know if I did that already in the first couple videos, but there's some cool stuff about that in Emacs. Fancy battery mode. So what happens if I turn that on? Diary fancy display mode. Is fancy battery mode actually in Emacs by default? Not sure. Christian is not happy about Emacs regex. Yeah, the syntax for regular expressions in Emacs is very weird compared to every other language you've used regular expressions in. Yes, James makes a good point. Search and replace for people used to Vim would be good. Evil is not quite the same. Yeah, I realized that a couple days ago when I was trying to do search and replace within the range of the current line and a mark that I set. And Vim has that ability, and I used to use it all the time in Vim, but Evil mode does not have that. So I ended up using, what is this? Let's see, query replace. Query replace or query replace regex. Those work pretty good for the same purpose. Yeah, search and replace for normies also would be good. Yeah, definitely. That's a very powerful feature of Emacs, and it actually surprised me the other day whenever I was working on Flux Compose, and I was trying to rename something, and it actually respected the casing of the words that it was replacing. So replacing the word token in various places with different casings, it actually replaced that word correctly with the same casing, which is kind of awesome. Duncan says Emacs regex be like backslash 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 backslash. Yeah, it is like that. It's really ugly. iSearch. Yeah, iSearch is definitely. I covered iSearch in maybe it was the first. What's it called? Absolute Beginner's Guide to Emacs. Alejandro is reminding me about Kua mode. Thank you for that, because I need to set that here in the key bindings. So global set key, define key, Kua mode. I don't know if that really is about key bindings, but people are probably going to wonder about where's Control C, Control V. Rowena with the spam texts again. Here we go. Okay. Anything else? So, minimal presentation, maybe icons for modes, emoji. Fade says, does anybody actually prefer Kua mode? Like, is that the reason they resist Emacs? Well, could be. Electric pair mode, that's kind of a good point, Gavin. That might be necessary for editing configuration. So editing configuration may be kind of a more important video. Electric pair mode, auto indent configuration. So yeah, some of this stuff we do need to talk about for sure. Matthew says, it's been a very, very long time since I had to deal with regex by hand. Was there something before that? Yeah. So the RX library, which actually is part of Emacs now, I think. If we look at the RX, probably a macro, Control H O. Come on now. Control H O. I have to move to another buffer, Scratch. Control H O, RX. So RX is a macro defined in a package that's built into Emacs. So that's, you know, maybe worth talking about, but probably not as a video in this series, especially RX. Rostislav says, people behind Emacs core development. That's a good idea, actually. I would like to have conversations with various people, either on live stream or potentially in like a podcast style format. You know, just like various people in the Emacs community, especially Emacs maintainers, and just sort of get their take on things. So at some point in the future, I would like to do that. But as you might have noticed, when it comes to me scheduling time to collaborate with people, like this thing with Prat that is still not scheduled yet, I do a very bad job of it because I haven't been checking my email or replying to emails reliably. So anybody who's been waiting on a reply, oh yeah, I should say that. Anybody who's sent me an email in the last 2 months and I haven't replied to you is because my email inbox is a pit of despair, and I am reluctant to even open it, even though I know I need to reply to some people. So I'm sorry about that. Lots of people send me emails, and I've not replied to them recently. Yeah, I need to get back on that. In fact, I'm thinking about switching to not much as a way to convince myself to be dealing with my email again. Christian says, we mentioned rectangular editing at all so far. I should have covered that somewhere else by now, but I haven't. Probably do need to do that. Oh, I saw your message before, Minas Mezar. Let's put rectangle editing. Improving the EWW experience. Maybe we could talk about that at some point, but maybe not as part of this series. Gavin says, make sure to mention you can wrap things by marking it and hitting parentheses. I haven't seen that yet. I haven't really used... well, let's see. Come on now. I don't like this thing where it tells me it can't. Control HV. Electric pair mode. It says it's nil in this buffer. Maybe I don't use it, actually, after all. Nicholas says, not much greater than MU4E. I don't know. I mean, I've been hearing a lot of people talking about using not much recently, and it's making me curious to try it. Solar says, have you heard about Shaw Fly keys? This project claims to be way more efficient key bindings than Evil. I've used another project that Shaw or Ja Lee had made called Ergo Emacs, and at the time I liked it a lot, but I have not used any of those. It's kind of... the further you get away from the in-the-box key bindings in Emacs, the harder it is to deal with any other mode that binds things a certain way. I mean, people who use Evil mode know this already, so I typically don't use even more exotic key binding configurations. Alejandro says emojis. Yeah, maybe we'll put an emoji in the mode line or something in that video. Jerry says, you and Sasha Chua together would be an awesome video. Yeah, I should talk to Sasha, actually. I think that she would be up for that. It would be a very interesting conversation. She's been around in the community for a very long time and doing excellent work. On Jaws Discord today, a function contributed by me was discussed? Really? I didn't know he had a Discord. I haven't actually checked, but I have been wondering if I've raised any ire from Ja in general. I know he does live streaming also, and he has strong opinions on things. I'm curious what he thinks about the videos I'm making, whether he thinks it's a waste of time or not. Okay, so I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we want to add to this list. We've got about 10 minutes left before the end of the stream. I think we've got a really, really good list, though. I'm feeling pretty confident about a lot of the topics. Also, if you're watching the recording of this stream and you also have ideas, please feel free to leave them in the comments or find me in the various places that I'm around. And let me know, because I want to make this much better than the previous attempt at Emacs From Scratch. And I'll go back and say, I don't think it was a bad series. There's a lot of information in there, but that was literally the first videos I made on System Crafters. I made videos before that, but this first videos I made for System Crafters talking about Emacs. And I've learned so much since then, and I've gotten better at making videos since then, so there's plenty I could do better than what I did before in that way. Gavin says, common mode key bindings may be worth mentioning in the making major mode video. Yeah, that's a good point. If you're trying to make your own major mode, knowing what the sort of conventions are for key bindings would be useful. Nicholas says, to be honest, if we covered Sasha's This Week in Emacs newsletter on the stream for a few minutes, it'd be a public service. I've done that a couple times before. Usually what I have to do is look at it beforehand to pick out interesting things before just scanning the list, because otherwise I'm just reading the screen and it's not very interesting. I probably should start doing that again, though. I just, I kind of felt bad about just using her work as the basis for saying what the news is in Emacs. I always said I was getting it from Emacs News, but, you know, it's kind of like, you know, feels like cheating a little bit. Nova says, what about planners for university? I mean, that's definitely something that org mode can help with. Edis mentioned before, maybe finalize writing a simple functionality Emacs. Yeah, I should probably finish what I was doing in the Emacs Lisp series with Dot Crafter, but I don't even, well, I'm sort of halfway using Dot Crafter at the moment. There's things that need to be fixed in it, but I'm trying to get away from that, use Geeks Home anyway, so anyway. Hey, Thomas and Anders. Anders asked, am I late? Well, no. I mean, you're here, but the stream is going to be done pretty soon. Nicholas says, invite her on to read. Oh, goodness. Invite her on to read it herself? That's not a bad idea. Ah. Gonzalo. I'm sorry. I don't know why my microphone's doing that. Gonzalo says, didn't you name the channel System Crafters in the second video of the series? Did I? It was early on, I think. Have a good weekend, Minas Mazer. Thanks for coming. Luis Enrique says, Dot Crafter plus Geeks Home is probably just going to be Geeks Home primarily, because I'm getting away from using literate configuration files. Even my latest Geek system config, I'm not putting in org files anymore. It's like straight up scheme code. Emacs from hell is waking up. Yeah, it is. I think it's coming back for... Gun says, oops, he had Fasolia today. Yeah, that's not what the sound was, but I can see why you would think that. Jeez, man. I swear, like, every piece of equipment is giving me trouble these days. I really need to get to a better office situation and get the stuff tightened up. Thomas says, and you changed the red color in the chat. Actually, I was complaining about this purple color because it looks terrible too. All right. So here's the plan. I think I'm going to try to start making these videos, or I'm going to start the series either this coming week or the one following. I also need to start making some of the videos I've been talking about for geeks as well. So I'm probably going to interleave these. I'll do, you know, 1 or 2 weeks on one topic and 1 or 2 weeks on the other topic. So we'll see how it goes. But I am thinking that this is going to be a lot more useful, provided that I can fit within the parameters I've set, like having relatively shorter videos, not explaining too much, which is hard for me because whenever I start on a path of explaining some topic, I tend to think, but this other piece of information is very useful and relevant, and I just like end up dumping a lot of information into a video. So I'm trying to stop it. Rostislav says, cover your ears, guys. Another one's coming. Thanga says, make every stream in the series below 1 hour. Yeah, that's part of the goal. We're not doing 1 hour videos for that series. Hey, Ramses. There's a mode to make interfaces in Emacs, interface similar to HTOP, but not real-time interfaces, but I do not remember the name of the package. I think you're thinking of TUI mode Emacs. That was discussed on... Where is that? Yeah, TUI.el. I think it's this thing. It was talked about in Emacs Conf. It's pretty cool. I haven't looked at it yet, but here comes the sound effects. Thank you so much, Rostislav, for the 10 euro in super chat.
Thanks, David. It was more informative than I thought.
Okay, that's the first time I've heard that. The robot is probably speaking louder than I am. Yes, the Christopher 2 says, will they be the non-live ones? Yeah, this will not be live stream recorded. I think we're going to do normal videos for that. All right, where was I going? Lova says, I don't know if I explained it well. What did you say? When in org mode, is there any minor mode that can split buffer in two, as in 2 pages display with page number? Well, there's two things you could do. One of them is follow mode, Emacs follow mode. I think that's what it's called. It's something where you can do like a split pane that will scroll as if they're a consistent document, but it doesn't do pages. There is Emacs Nano, was it Nano Emacs? I think it has more of like a page style view, but this is kind of a more cohesive Emacs configuration. So I don't know if that's going to be. Now I'm finally getting the comments about how loud the voice thing was. I'm gonna turn that volume down, I promise. But anyway, yeah, there's nothing to get exactly like, you know, pages with page numbers, but at least you can get this follow mode to have like a side-by-side view where when you scroll, you can see both of them as if they're, you know, 2 pages of the same book. All right. So I really appreciate the feedback on this today. Solar says, what about the Nix browser? I have not got around to covering Nix yet. However, Gavin, I don't know if Gavin is still here. If you go to Gavin Freeborn's channel, he covered Nix recently, so you should check out his video because I don't know how soon I will get to Nix myself. Let's see. Aurora says, I like the Nix suggestion. Yeah, Nix is a pretty obvious choice for Emacs users, but I haven't really, you know, gotten used to using it. Vitor says, any recommendations on laptop? I like, you know, ThinkPads a lot. Like the ThinkPad X1 Nano. It's pretty awesome. I also use this, this computer that I'm using for the stream is the ThinkPad X1 Extreme. So I'm kind of a ThinkPad fan. That's my choice. I actually have an affiliate thing set up with Lenovo so I can get like commissions if I get people to buy computers, but I'm so like disorganized that I haven't actually set that up yet where people can go and use that referral link. Anyway, so we'll see if we get this started next week. But like I said, thank you all for the input. A lot of really good ideas here today, a lot of things I didn't think about. So I'm very glad that I did this to get some of this information beforehand so I have a good plan going forward. So I'll probably do like a configuration fundamentals video next week to get the ball rolling on this, and then we'll start, you know, mixing in some of the other content we've been talking about. I'm not going to try to just do a straight line, you know, 5-10 weeks of Emacs from scratch because that would just be boring for everybody. So we'll try to mix it up a bit. But anyway, thank you all so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. This is the most people we've had on the stream in a while, so that was awesome. We got over 100 viewers, probably 110 viewers at some point, so that was really cool. So anyway, we'll see you next week on the next System Crafters video and also the stream next Friday. And also, if you check out the Flux Harmonic channel, the link's in the description below. I do streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays there where we do a lot of live coding in C. It's been a lot of fun. Some of the folks here show up there as well, and we have a really good time there. So would appreciate seeing some of you there if you are interested in that kind of thing. So anyway, thanks a lot for being here today, and have a great weekend. Until next time, happy hacking. We'll see ya.